abstractly, but I think we ought to take a closer look at the concept. Neoliberalism, first of all, is not new and it's not liberal.
Yeah.
So the term neoliberalism already is propaganda.
Yeah.
It's very old, old-fashioned class war, old-fashioned imperialism. Neoliberalism is basically the programs that were imposed on what became the Third World. You go back to the 18th century, actually the 17th century, the main industrial and commercial centers of the world were India and China. And the difference between the very rich and the very poor was not very great, maybe 3 to 1 in different countries. But something happened then. The main thing that happened is that what was called then liberalism was imposed on the colonized regions. They were compelled to follow market principles. The rich never did. The rich do not tolerate markets for themselves for very good reasons. They're too destructive. So this first England and the United States and Germany, France, the rest of the developed countries, Japan, imposed highly state-directed forms of development. The United States was quite striking. You probably all know this history, but it's worth bearing in mind. When the colonies were liberated, they got advice on sound economics from the greatest economists of the day, like Adam Smith. And the advice was, follow the principles of sound economics, what we call neoliberalism. Don't have tariffs, no protection, because that, you can prove, interferes with maximal efficiency. For the colonies, that meant use British manufactured goods, which are much better than yours. Concentrate on what you're good at, what later came to be called comparative advantage. So produce agricultural product, raw materials, agricultural products, fish, fur, and so on, and take superior British manufactured goods. Crucially, don't try to monopolize the commodities for which you have a natural advantage. And the most important one in those days, of course, was cotton. Cotton was kind of like the oil of the early industrial revolution. What did the colonies do? Exactly the opposite in every respect. Very high tariffs, block superior British manufacturers, develop your own textile industry later in the century, the steel industry, blocking superior British products and so on, all the way across the line. Massive state intervention in the economy, the railroads, the conquest of the territory, extermination of the population, conquest of half of Mexico, slavery, which is the most extreme interference with market principles you can think of, monopoly, strong efforts to monopolize cotton. The Mexican War was fought largely to try to, and the annexation of Texas, to try to obtain a monopoly of cotton. Actually, the presidents are very explicit about this. The Jacksonian presidents, Tyler, Polk, he said, yes, if we can gain a monopoly of cotton, we can bring England to our feet. Remember, England was the big enemy. That was the powerful military state who was blocking U.S. expansion. The U.S. couldn't conquer Canada, couldn't conquer Cuba. The British were just too strong. But we could bring Britain to our feet if we could monopolize cotton. And came pretty close. And of course, over the century, the relations of power shifted. Now, that's how the United States developed, right to the present. If you have a computer, use the internet, fly an airplane, use pharmaceuticals, you're using the products substantially created in the dynamic state sector of the economy, right to the present. Well, that's how the United States developed. It's the way England developed before it. It stole technology from the Low Countries, which were more advanced, from Ireland, from India, of course, and used methods that are now blocked by the World Trade Organization and without exception. I mean, there's city-states like Hong Kong are minor exceptions, but this is the pattern of development of the rich societies. Meanwhile, market systems were forced down the throat of the poor, and they became the third world. That's neoliberalism. It's now an effort. So how is it applying to the Nordic capitalism? Same way. Europe right now is in the midst of an extremely interesting process by which Europe is becoming extremely undemocratic. The Wall Street Journal, for example, not a great radical journal, pointed out recently that something which is correct. If you take a look at European countries, no matter what government is in power, they follow exactly the same policies. It could be a communist-run government, the government of the left, the government of the right. They follow pretty much the same policies because the policies are dictated from Brussels. The policies are determined by Brussels bureaucrats and Bundesbank and so on. The Nordic countries are resisting a little, but it's being imposed by force on the South. And what it's doing is take down this policy of austerity during recession. I mean, even the IMF by now recognizes that it's ludicrous from an economic point of view. The IMF economists have been publishing papers recently saying, this is crazy, it's a way to destroy an economy. But they understand that. But destroying the economy is not a bad objective, because the goal, remember, is to establish a plutocracy and precariat. The goal is class war, and that means undermine and dismantle the welfare state. And the Nordic countries are partially bending to this, Sweden, Norway, and so on. They're holding back, but it's the old policy it's basically a policy of class war, which is constantly falling.